So USC, this is a blue blood program. Expected to win championships during the 70s and 80s, was right there in competition for elite status. Of course, Pete Carroll took over and resurrected the program to what most USC fans believe it should be on a consistent basis. So how close are we from seeing that again? Do we have the right guy on the sideline, Matt, to lead this program to that status? And your thoughts about where USC stands right now in the scope of college football and the landscape versus where it could be?
As far as it being close to elite status, I would say USC right now is not – they're close in terms of talent, but in terms of coaching, they're not quite there yet. And the reason I say that is because, as I've mentioned in the past before, I think Clay Helton needed to do certain things differently in order to improve. Now, so far, he has not done that. He hasn't done that the last few years. I know everyone wants to bring up the Rose Bowl, winning the Pac-12 championship, but since then, everything kind of took a tailspin. Like, recruiting has gone down. They haven't been performing quite to those standards, regardless of talent. I mean, last year the offense, I think improved. However, the defense was another story. And then we saw in the Holiday Bowl against Iowa just how far USC is from reaching that elite status. So, as I mentioned before, I don't think they have the right guy on the sideline to do it, to get back to elite status, based off of what we're seeing with recruiting, with a lot of the blue chip prospects going out of state, going to play at Oregon or at Clemson. It's a lot that has to be done at USC just to turn this whole thing around.
Pete, I got to say, I'm fascinated by the situation at USC. The brand, the location, the history, the tradition, the prestige, the cachet is all in place. The tangibles aren't there right now, and the winning at the level that we would expect, and the talents, even elite status in spots, in areas, but not consistently across the board for the entirety of the roster.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to your point about how it's the cachet, the blue blood program, the Southern California palm trees. And that only goes really so far, I think you're starting to see, because USC is missing out on these guys that are from a local area. And you grew up rooting for USC and grew up thinking, I'm going to play, high school football at Mater Dei or St. John Bosco, and I'm going to go to play at USC because that's where Barkley went, that's where Leinart went, that's where Reggie Bush went, that's where all these guys went and became Heisman Trophy winners, became national champions, and went on to the NFL. And because of all the uncertainty and all the turnover and the scandals, USC isn't like that anymore. And I don't think USC's administration and some of their coaches are really realizing, hey, just because we have those crimson and gold colors and because we have the logo, that players are going to flock here and want to play here. And it's a bit of a disgrace from the administration standpoint, because it's almost like they're putting a blind eye to the fans, to the recruiting process, and just entirely to kind of the rest of the Pac-12 and the rest of their opponents, saying, hey, we're going to be okay. Clay Helton just came out recently and said, hey, we didn't win this recruiting class, but we want to win on Saturdays. We don't care about winning the recruiting class. But really, it's been the opposite the last couple of years, where USC has won recruiting classes and then has come out on the field and hasn't won big time. I mean, yes, they won the Pac-12 title with Sam Darnold and a stacked roster, but since then, they haven't really done anything, and they had their first losing season in almost 20 years. USC's had only 4 losing seasons since 1968, and so you can't expect them to have a fan base get excited when you go 5-7 and then keep the coach, and then have another up and down year, and then keep the coach again. And the whole coaching debacle was terrible, because no one knew if Clay Helton was coming back. There was a report from a Sports Illustrated Maven journalist that said that he was fired on a Sunday, and the USC athletic department, Tim Tessalone, sports information director, and everyone was up in arms and furious at that report because it was obviously false. And some even say that there's even a theory going around, I don't know if I believe it, but because that this journalist said that Clay Helton was fired, it was almost like the USC athletics department wanted to keep Clay Helton just to prove that they were the ones that were making the statements and they were the ones that were in charge of breaking news. So it was a total mess here in Southern California. And you had all these rumors of, head coaches coming in. Urban Meyer, who I saw a lot at Fox Sports this fall, he was doing the show with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart. And I think he was thoroughly enjoying his time in Southern California working with these guys. So there was kind of a path and a trend. People were talking about how Urban could easily slot into USC. But I just got confirmation from a source close at Fox that worked with him and saw Urban a lot and talked with him personally. And he said Urban never had an interest whatsoever in coming to USC, which surprised me. I didn't know that was the case. And apparently Urban doesn't like LA. He doesn't want to live here full time. He is here, very frequently, but now I think he's back to wherever he calls his hometown. And I also don't think he wanted to get into this kind of mess of administration, of coordinators. Last year, they overhauled the offensive coordinators and everything in the offensive unit. This year is the opposite. They're overhauling the defense, new DC, new special teams coach. Then they let go of 3 more defensive coaches yesterday and brought some of Todd Orlando's former coaches back from Texas. So Urban Meyer was never had a chance, which for USC fans, I mean, they were already sad that it wasn't an Urban Meyer, wasn't a big name, a PJ Fleck coming to Troy. But the fact that he never was even interested is even, a worse reflection on the USC coaching search. And then to make it even matters worse, I heard also from the same source that how Urban didn't want to come, that James Franklin from Penn State actually was interested in coming. And James Franklin would have been a perfect fit at USC, no doubt. But really what it came down to was USC, the administration being cheap. They wanted to save money. Clay Helton, if they fire him, would be owed a huge buyout because Lynn Swann's contract extension they signed a couple years ago after Clay Helton's hot start. And so USC didn't want to pay, 10, 20 million for Clay Helton's buyout and all of his staff, because as soon as you hire an Urban Meyer, James Franklin, you have to overhaul the staff again and pay those guys again. So really, USC was being cheap, wanted to save a bit of money, thought they could kind of have a year here where Clay's the head coach, and they didn't want to splurge on a big name coach until they had that guy down pat. So I think that was the confusion with Clay Helton and the report coming out he was fired. I think USC was kind of in limbo waiting. Is this coach going to say yes? Can we get someone else? Because I commend USC not just grabbing a random coach off the market, someone that didn't have a connection, someone that wasn't, in the recruiting system here in Southern California. But really, you kept Helton, and then you got a guy like Todd Orlando who doesn't have a connection to the Southern California recruiting pipeline. And I just don't know going into next year how many of these coaches are actually going to be sticking around the long term. The only guy I can see in the long term that people really love and sticking around is Graham Harrell, who did a fantastic job in the air raid offense this year. And of course, he had head coaching interviews with UNLV and other schools were trying to pry him away from USC. But it seems like it's just a holdover this year with Clay Helton, which is a bit of a travesty because this USC team is stacked next year. And, I'm not just saying that because I'm saying that and I'm an alumni of the school. I'm saying that because this team is going to be stacked. Utah's taking a step back. Oregon's losing Justin Herbert. Oregon will still be really good. And I actually have USC losing at Oregon. We'll get into the schedule later. But this USC team is veteran laden on defense, and then we saw the offense last year as one of the best in the nation. So it's interesting because we have a great roster, a great group of kids, and then just coaching administration problems everywhere you look.
Yeah, we'll have to let the Urban Meyer narrative go because it didn't happen, and as Pete just explained, it never was going to happen. But can you imagine the conversation that we would be having for an hour? How different it would be if Urban Meyer was the head coach as opposed to Clay Helton. I would have just been fascinated to see, is Urban Meyer going to do this again? Florida, Ohio State, and even what he did at Bowling Green in Utah, basically walk in with all the cachet and the brand and the location and everything working for him, and the Pac-12 not being as daunting as the Big Ten or the SEC. I would just think that he would just take the thing over. And we would see 11-1s getting cranked out within a couple of years, if not sooner. But we're not there. We're with Clay Helton, and he is the head coach